Can I welcome you all to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee? Before we start, please can I remind everyone that this meeting is being live streamed and the recording archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, please use the raise hand function to alert me that you would like to speak. I will indicate when it is your turn to speak, so please then select the request to speak button, which will allow you to come onto screen. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function. The chat function should only be used to highlight any technical issues and to get the attention of myself or the Democratic Services officers. Thank you very much. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or to silent. There we are. Part one then. Item number 1, apologies for absence.
None, Chair. All members are present.
Thank you. Item 2 then. The minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 20th of May 2024, for correctness only. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Councillor Secretary, Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? No, thank you. Item 3, to receive any declarations of interest. Nope, there are none. Item 4 then is the use of performance information, service user perspective and outcomes, Vale Glamorgan Council, Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, 22nd of May 2024, which has been referred to us. Tom.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. Good evening, committee. As you say, Chair, this is a reference from the Corporate Performance and Resources Committee being brought to your committee this evening for oversight in terms of the response to the recommendations that Audit Wales have made in Appendix A, which is their overarching report. Appendix B provides you with the Council's proposed action plan in response to the two recommendations that have been made. Just by way of a bit of brief background to the particular piece of work, Audit Wales have carried out this study across all 22 local authorities in Wales. They've done that at a local level, and the report that you've got this evening is the Vale Glamorgan Council's local report. Later on in the year, Audit Wales are proposing to publish a composite report of making recommendations and drawing findings from across the country. So once we receive that, we'll be bringing that through the political system as well for consideration. This particular review looked at two very specific issues: the provision or use of performance information and service user perspective and outcomes that is provided to senior officers and members. And Audit Wales helpfully made it very clear in the report that it wasn't a full in-depth review of all performance arrangements, and it was specifically relating to the performance reports that are brought before the strategic leadership team, but also all scrutiny committees, as you know. It's important, I think, as well, just to make the point in terms of the focus on outcomes. Audit Wales was specifically looking for information relating to service user perspective on existing services. So this doesn't reflect work in terms of involvement, engagement, consultation activity. It's about kind of satisfaction and perception of existing services, not ones that are subject to change. It's come at a really useful point for the council. I think it's the two recommendations that have been made are true and fair from our perspective, and they're useful in the sense that when we come on to the next agenda item, Chair, we'll be talking about the work to develop the new corporate plan and the performance arrangements that come alongside that. So there are a number of conclusions that are highlighted in paragraph 2.4, suggesting that performance information provides senior leaders with a limited understanding of service user perspective and outcomes, and that there is some insight and perspective, but it's not necessarily consistent as they would expect, or indeed that we would want to achieve, and therefore understanding the impact of that when taking decisions is therefore limited. And it makes a series of, as I say, conclusions as a result. There are two recommendations that have been made so that we should strengthen the information that we provide to senior leaders to enable them to understand how well services and policies are meeting the needs of service users, and then that we should strengthen the information provided to senior leaders to help us evaluate whether the council's delivering objectives and intended outcomes. And I think those are, excuse me, are useful, as I say, at this particular juncture. When the report was presented to the Corporate Performance and Resources Committee, you'll see in the reference the discussion that there's reference there to Councillor Goodjohn, who welcomed the progress that was being taken forward, but also asked about the comparisons with other local authorities, and colleagues from Audit Wales made it clear that national study report would be presented later on in the year. They also confirmed that every authority had received a set of recommendations relating to this particular piece of work, some more than others, and just reiterated that we'd received 2 recommendations. Just to highlight for elected members' assurance, the action plan in Appendix B, in terms of that service user perspective, members will be aware of the recent Let's Talk resident survey that's been reported to Cabinet and a variety of committees. That's really important evidence for us to be taking consideration of, and the strategic leadership team in particular is looking at that in detail as we're developing the new corporate plan and as we go through the summer into the budget setting process as well. Members who might be members of scrutiny committees will note that we've added some additional performance measures into the framework this year, specifically relating to service user perspective and satisfaction. We've also strengthened the annual delivery plan to include the importance of engagement and involvement of colleagues, of the residents, alongside organisational resilience at the suggestion of members of Corporate Performance and Resources Committee. And then in terms of the outcomes focus that we should be looking to strengthen, we've reiterated guidance as part of the end of year and regular performance monitoring information requests to all colleagues to ask them to give us some information about the so what. So what did that action lead to in terms of an outcome? And we'll also be strengthening the way in which we present that information to yourselves and other members as part of the annual self-assessment report that I'll mention in the next item. We've also been at the formative stages of discussing the corporate plan, and we led a session with all of our senior officers in the last fortnight where specifically we were asking them to look at what does an outcome for new objectives specifically look like through the eyes of residents by 2030 in response to this particular piece of work. And that supplements some of the training that we provided to elected members back in March, where we were talking about effective scrutiny techniques and the ability to use outcomes as a way of framing that scrutiny. So that's a really quick overview, Chair, of the report this evening.
Yes, thank you, Tom, for that. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Thanks for that. You've sort of partially answered them, actually, so thank you for covering a lot of that. In relation to the recommendations, there's a couple that have got April 24 and have got complete in there. In particular, I like this report and the fact it reflected some of the discussions we've had here about measuring outcomes rather than outputs, and we've discussed a few times about the fact that a lot comes through which is output based. It is not an easy task though to turn this into outcomes, so I just wanted to check, is there ongoing support for staff or for those people who are monitoring these, but particularly not monitoring them now, but setting them for the future in terms of outcomes, in terms of that process, because it is really something very difficult to get your head around. So is there going to be ongoing sort of repeat training or support for that? And I guess probably from internal audit or other sources as well, independent checks that that's an ongoing process, not just a one-off to achieve recommendations set in a report.
Thank you, Mr. Ireland. Absolutely. In terms of the first point in including those actions that were completed in April 24, that's just for completeness to provide the 2 committees and then to Cabinet the assurance that we took some really quick response and that we've delivered upon those actions. I didn't say, but in terms of this action plan, the organisation response form, we always make sure we share the draft with Audit Wales colleagues as well early in the process, and that they give their consideration to what we're proposing as being proportionate in response to their recommendations. So it was just to make sure that we covered off that angle. In terms of the outcomes versus outputs discussion, absolutely you're right. It's a different way of thinking for people. We have been working, I'm very grateful to the Office of the Future Generations Commissioner who have been providing us with a lot of support and guidance in the process so far. We had a really good session with them, looking at futures thinking very much through the eyes of outcomes that we want to achieve. And that was the framework that we used at that Chief Officer session a couple of weeks ago, where we had sort of 60 or so colleagues, where we were asking them not to talk about what were the steps that they were going to do or the actions that they were going to be delivering, but actually what would it feel like, look like, what would experience be for those people receiving the services or the or the outcomes from the work that we're doing. So that was this, I guess, the first part of the process. We're planning now to engage with a really wide variety of stakeholders, the public, elected members, and our partners over the next couple of months at an early stage on the objectives. Again, with the focus on what do they perceive those outcomes to be? And one of the things that I think will be really interesting with this corporate plan, and I'd really welcome all members and elected members' input into it, especially during the consultation process, is if we're going to truly talk about outcomes for citizens from our corporate plan, those outcomes aren't always things that we're 100% in control of. So that would feel like a very different way of us monitoring the impact of our work as a public service, knowing that we're not 100% in control of the destiny of those outcomes. And that could have some quite wide-ranging impact in terms of then how elected members would look to scrutinise activity and hold people to account. So very much the beginning of a journey, and as I say, on the next agenda item I'll cover off some of the process for going through that corporate plan development, and very much then specifically around how we monitor and report on progress in the future, and that will come with a lot of training and support, both for elected members and committee, but also then for our colleagues as well.
Sarah Jane.
Hi, good evening, Chair. Good evening, committee. Yes, just to pick up on what Tom was saying there, just to kind of emphasise that, to give you assurance that we've had really constructive conversations with officers on the back of this report. We did have discussion about the council's response, and obviously we will be kind of following up what the council is doing, and in terms of taking forward its responses as per those recommendations. Just an update really on the national summary report that Tom referred to. We are hoping that will be published, I think, July now. So obviously that is something that we can, more than happy to bring back to the committee, as Tom said. We're also hoping to do an event through our Good Practice Exchange team later on in the autumn, in part picking up Mr. Ireland's point that some of this we recognise is quite difficult to try to stimulate some discussion and debate about how authorities can do more on this. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. But yeah, just to reiterate, though, that we've had, constructive discussions with officers on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah Jane. Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Tom. I think this is really positive feedback that you've provided. But one of the things that when we talked about things like Let's Talk resident survey, and that was highlighted some issues that residents perceive to have with the council. And often these things are, I fear, not taken as seriously as they should be. And in that respect, what I'm actually interested in is understanding the insights of being able to go deeper on some of these issues with residents. And there was nothing about that in this report about trying to, if there are difficult things that residents are telling us, how do we get deeper into an understanding of what the issues are? Because I think that insight we're going to need more and more as this council gets into its future, because budgets will get tighter. We need to find ways to work with residents so that we truly understand. Because sometimes I feel, and just to finish, Chair, I think one of the things that you do when you get a survey, it's a very one-dimensional response. You ask them for something, they give you the answer. And when that answer isn't palatable, we either, the institutional response is, let's protect the institution. Whereas actually, I think there's something probably beneath that we should just scrape a little bit on. Thank you.
That's good, Hooper. All right, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hooper. Absolutely, and I think you're right in terms of the Let's Talk survey is the first piece of having that conversation, isn't it? It gives a very comprehensive overview of public perception across a whole range of different issues, including perception of council services as well. I can give the committee the assurance definitely that we are taking it very seriously. It's been discussed at a number of committees, so there's that's being done very much in the open. Cabinet have asked for a review of the public participation strategies action plan, very much in response to tie back in with the findings, and that will go back to Cabinet before the recess. It's something that that I'm prioritising the response on. But also internally, we've been discussing this in a variety of different fora to make sure that we get as much of those different perspectives on those results as we possibly can. One of the really worthwhile conversations will be at the Equalities Consultative Forum, which is attended by external organisations. It's very much a forum where we are able to share council thoughts, plans, ideas, but equally to listen to what actually is the response to those kind of organisations to what we're looking at doing. And that's just one example. We've looked at it from Project Zero. We've looked at it from the Strategic Insight Board to make sure it's being spread throughout the organisation. The point you make, I think, is really valid in terms of how do we go deeper into some of those very specific issues. And I think that the survey and the purpose of the approach that we've taken has been to be able to share that information with as many colleagues as we possibly can. So one of the ways of us doing some of that deeper dive is going to be through some of the placemaking work that will be happening in the major towns. It complements the insight that those teams have gleaned. It also definitely will inform the corporate plan and the wellbeing objectives when we present those for engagement. It's very much looking to respond directly to what residents have said. And also, you know, I'm using it in some of the work that we're doing around community-focused schools, the tackling deprivation work under the auspices of the PSB. So it's become a central part of our evidence base. But you are right; it's the first part of that you then need to go and unpack and understand, because different people will have different perceptions and different experiences, and what we need to do is make sure we understand those and we can respond where it's appropriate for us to. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I've got Councillor Prothero.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Tom. And just really agreeing with the direction of travel from Councillor Hooper there. Surveys are great, and I know a lot of effort went into Let's Talk this year. And they do provide some insight, but of course it's the questions that we put to them that we get answers to, and they have to become more than observational, don't they? Because if we dig deeper, as Councillor Hooper has suggested, then we can actually look to create more, I suppose, user-controlled and user-centric type services that resonate with our residents, and that takes more than a survey, doesn't it? As we know, and as we have talked about in the past, using citizens and service users in a more kind of assembly type way will be really good. But yeah, the report's really interesting. As you said, it's absolutely timely, and it's something that we can use to help think about how we can be more, I suppose, use more design thinking with our insight work. And it's really welcome. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Prothero. Are there any other questions? I've just got a couple. I'm just picking up on Nigel's point of the dates. Obviously, the dates have expired on some of these, and given the report was May 22, then I would have thought the March 24 ones and April 24 should have been saying they were completed if they've been completed, Tom. So I assume they are completed from what you said. So, you know, if that could be picked up, that's good. The other thing I've just wanted to question is a lot of information comes through the various reports that come through to this committee. If we look at the complaints report, then there's a tremendous amount of performance or non-performance data contained within that report. And as you'll know, another area which I am concerned, and I'm concerned every year, as you know, Tom, councillor complaints, because councillors have a tremendous amount of knowledge about the complaints they receive from residents in their area, and that's not recorded, in my view, anywhere. And again, that would support, and I'm just wondering whether that could be looked at as well, because I think when I added it up, you'd get 20,000 complaints if each councillor had 2 complaints a day for 200 days. So, you know, but it's a huge amount of information that you're missing. And the other one is, which is what Nigel said, is the audit committee reports, which we have, and where there are failings. We dealt with one set last committee, which was the leisure services. You're not aware of any leisure service complaints because they don't get fed through to you. They go to the leisure company and they deal with them. And I think, you know, if you capture that, it was raised in last committee, that would be useful. But there are also others, and we'll deal with them a little later on when we come on to Andrew's report, you know, appointee and deputy services. There's amounts of money which have not yet been returned to legal owners. You look at the adult placements, there are big issues around adult placements which are being picked up by the audit team. And again, I think that needs to be reflected again in performance, because if they're being ignored, then I'm not saying they are, but if they are they've been ignored to date, then there's again another wealth of information you've got there. You know, I wholeheartedly agree with the issue about questionnaires. Questionnaire is an art, as you know. You get back what you actually asked the question for, and you know, you can frame it. You know, there are professionals out there who will get you the answers you need, Tom. You know, so I think, you know, it's that open dialogue. And the other point I just make in regards to what Councillor Hooper said, which I fully agree with, you know, if it's an open and transparent council, which the Vale is, you know, tending to be, it's this question of how well do you know yourself as a council? And I think, you know, that's a key question that you really need to answer in dealing with these issues, whether you fudge it or whether you push it off or whether you push it into the hard to deal with box is not the issue. These are the issues in some respects, as you know, that should be going to scrutiny. Scrutiny should be assisting in identifying areas for improvement in the authority, not just, you know, bashing what can be the administration or people like that. They're there as a very purposeful committee to say, look, have you thought about doing it this way, or have you thought about doing it that? And I think that's where there's a mindset change that's required. And, you know, hopefully the member seminars will pick that up, because everyone's got a part to play in this, you know, and, you know, Councillor Hooper made a point, budget's going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. And, you know, you've only got a small cake and you divide it the way you can. But and the problem is when the cake gets smaller, there'll be more complaints. Sorry.
No, not at all, Chair. And on the first point around the dates and completion, I think that's simply a matter of the timing between, obviously we completed the organisational response liaising with Audit Wales colleagues before this report then went in the system for the Corporate Performance and Resources Committee. It's just about the kind of time lag. And the second point around that wealth of information coming through committees, I think that that's something that both Audit Wales and ourselves recognised or acknowledged within the scope of this report. Those separate pieces of insight weren't within the scope of what colleagues in Audit Wales were actually looking specifically at, albeit that lots of it is reflected in the performance reports as well. And your point around, you know, how well do we know ourselves as a council? That's very much the reason for running the Let's Talk survey, and I'm very much taking on board the feedback across the whole range of questions that people have fed back. We've recently introduced within the performance reports to the scrutiny committees an areas of improvement or concerns section within those presentations, being mindful that sometimes we can set the actions in our service plans right at the very beginning of the year, but then if something crops up in September or October, there's not a mechanism to be making members aware of those kind of issues. So that's the reason for having introduced that, very much reflecting, as you say, what are those things, and equally then how can scrutiny committees themselves get involved in that work. And there's a standing item on all of the agenda conferences for scrutiny meetings in order to give the chairs and vice chair an opportunity to raise any of those particular issues. But absolutely, this is all part of a journey towards being as open and transparent as we can on this stuff.
Thank you for that. Councillor Goodjohn.
Yes, just to add on to the debate that we're having, I think it's important to note the Vale is a very large institution, especially locally as the largest employer. And I can most definitely think of departments which I would say have institutional problems with communication and with evaluating its own performance. I would not include Tom or much of the corporate performance team in that, but it totally depends on the department what kind of response you get to the public and to us as councillors, and that needs to be reflected in the way that we tackle this culturally within the organisation. And I think by this Let's Talk survey is the first step towards breaking that truly, and that is what we need to set in of itself, because in of itself, the public engagement, what we're doing here is an objective, and it may not feel like that, but when there are flare moments which occur, which has been pointed out, which I'm going to give one example, for example, Eagleswell, when something like that, bursts into flame, that occurs because of a more institutional, longer-term problem that people don't feel they've been communicated to, and that's when trust totally breaks down. And I think there has definitely been a problem in particular departments where they haven't seen that, and instead they've seen the engagement as part of the problem. So we most definitely need to break that in every part of the institution and reflect how we make specific departments specifically work towards goals to bring them up to speed to the rest of the institution, because a lot of the front-facing stuff is not as user-friendly as this side of things, as the Let's Talk, as the corporate performance. And we want everyone up to the same standard. So it doesn't matter if you're trying to get rats out of your building or trying to book a place in the leisure centre, you have the same level of engagement with you at that time.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And really, I suppose just building on that, I think there is a recognition that there are different approaches in different parts of the organisation, and there's something about now taking a step back, listening properly to what Let's Talk is telling us, and also the importance of how we reframe some of those conversations with residents, because as the chair was saying, as budgets get tighter and prioritisation and inevitable rationing of certain types of services happens, we need to make sure that we've got constructive relationships with residents, and that's a different type of relationship than perhaps local authorities have had in the past. And one of the things that is part of the reshaping programme, and members will have a report on this in the coming couple of months, is around that tone of voice and how we interact with our residents. It's something that the Chief Exec is taking a personal lead on in terms of getting the basics done brilliantly every time, so that we make sure that we've got those processes in place and they're consistently applied, because we recognise that those interactions are really valuable with people. So yeah, thank you for the points.
Okay, are there any other questions? No? Any comments? Only make a comment on what Councillor Goodjohn said. I think if you can get it right, you can still give the very difficult messages, but in a different way. Because if you get it very badly wrong, then, whatever the outcome is at the end, it's still going to be the outcome. But it's making sure you get all your ducks in the row to ensure that people are engaged. You do feedback to people, they have their say, etc., etc. But ultimately, you may still have to give the same message at the end of the day to say no. So, yeah, I think, and it's great to hear that there's a learning exercise there. The only other comment is for Sarah. On page 8 of your report, there's a word missing on paragraph 27. It should say the council's corporate plan. You've missed out plan. So just a little technical, me being pedantic it is, showing I've read the report. Okay, if there's no comments, you see the recommendation there. Obviously, we note the contents of this report. Just quickly get into the recommendation, which is somewhere. We note the contents of the report. Obviously, the issues, Tom, you can pick up and feed back up to Cabinet and Council. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Well, thank you, Nigel. Anyone against? Nope. Thank you. Item 5 report, which is flowing very nicely into this now. The development of the corporate plan 25-2030, panel performance assessment, and the annual performance calendar 24-25. Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And this is quite a procedural report, but this is the third time we've produced it. We thought it was useful for elected members, so we've sent it through Cabinet, but also to all of the scrutiny committees and to yourselves at Governance and Audit Committee this evening, really to give you oversight of how all of these various aspects and strands of performance work associated with the Local Government and Elections Act all fit together. This year, as you say, Chair, there are a couple of added aspects in terms of developing the new corporate plan to 2030 and that panel assessment as well. Within the initial section of the report from paragraph 2.2, we talk about the development of the corporate plan. At the moment, it's proposed that we retain the council's vision and values, so strong communities with a bright future, with the values of ambitious, proud, open and together. They are well known in the organisation and they seem and feel relevant. But it does feel time that we look at developing a set of new wellbeing objectives, and they're required both by the Local Government Act, but also the Future Generations Act in terms of demonstrating our contribution to the wellbeing goals for Wales and how we use the 5 ways of working to ensure our decisions are sustainable. So we've commenced some of that work. I mentioned in the previous item that we've engaged with the Future Generations Commissioner. We've also engaged with SIPFA. We're looking at the Let's Talk survey results. We've got a huge amount of data about the Vale of Glamorgan regulatory recommendations, the outcomes of our self-assessment and the PSB's wellbeing plan and their objectives. So we've started to do some work whereby we've drafted a set of objectives. We're going to be engaging on those across the summer months, and that's where the session around outcomes with chief officers recently has come in, because the aim is for the plan to be more outcome focused in the future so that it's clearer what we're seeking to achieve and that we can measure and evidence how we're doing. It'll be developed now in the coming months alongside the medium-term financial plan and the reshaping programme, and you've got an indicative timetable in paragraph 2.8 for the corporate plan. Really importantly, in the autumn, when we get to consultation, obviously we'll be bringing that to all scrutiny committees, your committee as well, Chair, as well as a variety of different forums. In the engagement phase that you'll see in the next couple of months, we'll be engaging with, as I said in the previous item, a wide range of different stakeholders. The report then goes on at paragraph 210 to talk about the panel performance assessment. This was a requirement introduced by the Local Government and Elections Act in part 6 of the legislation. And it means that all local authorities have a duty to undertake an external panel performance assessment once in each electoral cycle. It's down to the council to determine the most appropriate timing of that panel assessment, and importantly it provides an independent external challenge to help us inform our future plans. It's very much complementary with the self-assessment approach, but sometimes that's described as the marking your own homework. This is getting our homework in effect invigilated, I guess. So we're working with the WLGA. They're going to do some of the administration for us, so they'll identify potential panel members. They'll also do some of the kind of administration and coordination. And you can see in paragraph 2.12 the details of the makeup of that panel. The minimum makeup is determined within the statutory guidance. It is possible for the council to determine if we would like to supplement that with other panel members. In terms of where we're at with that particular piece of work, we've submitted a scoping document to the WLGA, very much providing them with an oversight of the organisation and the Vale of Glamorgan as an area, the kind of challenges and opportunities that exist here for our residents. And what we're asking for that panel assessment to focus in on is our ability to use the new corporate plan, the reshaping programme, our medium-term financial strategy, and how effective our arrangements will be in meeting our future challenges. The panel assessment itself is scheduled to take place in the autumn. We're probably looking at the second week of November currently. The third of the four aspects of this report this evening, Chair, then talks about a reflection on last year's self-assessment. So paragraph 220 gives you the learnings from the 2022-23 self-assessment and an outline of what we're proposing to do in response. And many thanks to members of this committee and to other committees for the feedback that we had. So this year we've simplified the Directorate self-assessment documents, stripping out some of the duplication there, but also then increasing the rigour in terms of the peer challenge process. I had the pleasure of mine this afternoon in the with my immediate cabinet members, the scrutiny chair, chief executive, and a challenge director as well. And we're looking very much at going into more detail at that stage so that we can challenge one another before we get to the council version. We've also had member feedback that would be useful to enhance the summary report, an easy read version published alongside it, much more detail in terms of engagement and insight data that has underpinned the self-assessment, so you'll see that being expanded upon this year, and also talking about areas of emerging concern. And I think it was Councillor Hooper who raised this last year in terms of making sure that there's sufficient balance within the document, and we think that those areas of emerging concern could be a useful mechanic for doing that. And then finally, from paragraph 2.30, just gives you an overview of the annual performance calendar itself and what activities are going to take place month by month. That's then shown in Appendix A, which then brings together all of that activity. A big thank you to elected members and lay members who've attended the series of informal workshops that happen throughout the year. They've been really useful in giving an opportunity for elected members to feedback on the format and content and presentation of various different aspects of this work. And just to say that these will continue throughout the year because they are a really valuable source of insight for us as officers. So that's a bit of an overview for you, Chair. It's being brought primarily for awareness, but obviously then any views being referred back to the Council's Cabinet.
Yes, thank you for that, Tom. Questions? Councillor Goodjohn?
Thank you. And Tom can imagine what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it nonetheless because I think it's important feedback and important scrutiny on the new corporate plan. First off, this is nothing new, but I think it has to be said this is a corporate plan for 25 to 30 that we are considering, and I'm very much hoping that we can make Project Zero heart and centre of this document. We absolutely must consider there is only 5.5 years left to hit the target that we set ourselves, and therefore we can definitely link in everything with the carbon reduction plan into the corporate plan. And I hope that once we do finally see that document very soon, that we can introduce a huge number of the considerations and the recommendations in that and embed it within the corporate plan. And I'd be really interested in any engagement you can do with the Project Zero team that you have in putting that heart and centre into any part of the document, including any kind of core challenges, if you intend to include that this time, as being the most important thing for this organisation. Second off, I would say that we need to consider specific targets on an overall level. How that specifically happens, I couldn't tell you, but there needs to be success and failure criteria of a 5-year document to some extent. Now, that's always difficult because you don't know what's going to be around the corner. But if I might make one suggestion, the success or failure of Project Zero seems a very good one to include. That's just on a broad level. As for the engagement, we get a lot of engagement as members on the individual low-level stuff. On have we hit this specific target? What about these specific performance indicators? Does that make sense? And that's a lot of what we've seen, and a lot of, if I take, for example, the member workshop in December of 24 that we've got suggested here, a lot of that is to consider PMF arrangements and the kind of lower level detail stuff. It would be great if we can have more engagement on the higher level of what we are considering as an organisation overall on a cross-party basis to be the most important challenges that we have to face. I don't think we get a huge amount of opportunity as members to consider the wider scale of what we're doing, and that would be nice to think about alongside, of course, the SLT, which obviously needs to be considered first and foremost. It would be nice to feed in as to what members feel are the biggest challenges that we're facing at the moment. I think there is some level to that with, there was one early on in July that you have proposed, which does include that, but I would love to see more just because of the level of which we engage with the ADP on a quarter-to-quarter basis. I think that's all for now. I'll leave it be to everyone else if they have anything else they want to say. I've already stolen Project Zero from Mark, so.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Certainly, Project Zero is one of those really important strategic issues for the organisation, and one of the objectives in draft that we're developing very much links to that, and I think Project Zero will run through a lot of the other elements as well. The point you made around setting targets for the 5-year plan, I think links really neatly into that discussion that you were having as a committee around outcomes just now, and I absolutely agree. It will be really good and interesting as we have the engagement and involvement work over the next few months to see actually what could those outcomes look like. So, you know, if we're talking about issues of childhood obesity, for example, setting ourselves a target for what do we want to see those levels looking like by 2030, but in the knowledge that that's not the sole preserve of the local authority to be able to influence. So I'm really keen to get some discussion underway relating to those things. And I think that links with the point you were making about engagement of elected members. And you're right, you get the really regular engagement on individual actions, individual targets. It's obviously 5 years since we developed the corporate plan, and we're very keen to do this in a more participative way. So we're currently putting plans in place to run some stakeholder events, and the current thinking is that we'd like to invite all elected members to come to those events, but we'll do that alongside inviting our partners, people like the town and community councils, members of the voluntary sector. I mentioned the Equalities Consultative Forum, but also people like Public Health, the University Health Board, the police, fire, ambulance service, because we think actually it might be really useful for us to hear those conversations being had from a variety of different perspectives. The challenge that you've laid down, Councillor Goodjohn, in terms of then how could we continue that, I'll take that back and give it some thought as to how we can continue that during the consultation process once we've actually got a draft of things, because perhaps there's a way alongside scrutiny committees that we could also look to consult with yourselves as elected members. So no, thank you very much.
Any other questions? No? Can I just ask a couple of questions then, Tom? Just for clarity, on paragraph 2.5, you've got support and facilitation being provided by the Office of the Future Generation Commissioner and C.co. Who's C.co? What are they?
C.co or CCO are an arm of CIPFA, so the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. They offer public sector consultancy services.
Okay, I'm glad you knew that because I doubt if many of us wouldn't know that, so that's okay. The I don't know whether you could answer this question. Whilst obviously there's a corporate plan for 2025-2030, has the council ever thought of doing away with a corporate plan for 5 years and actually only doing it for 2? On the basis that you don't know what your budget's going to be, there are so many things that you don't know that's going to happen, and to set now what you're going to do in 2030 in reality is a misnomer, because so many things change, and lots of management speak now will tell you that a 5-year plan is not worth doing. You should look at 1 to 2 year plan. And I say that because firstly, budget settlements come in on an annual basis. If Welsh Government could tell you what it's going to be for 5 years, then you'd be in a much better position. But they don't, so you're on an annual basis. So the issue about, which I was going to pick up on July 24, development of the budget, medium-term financial plan alongside the corporate plan, because obviously one's got to pay for the other. And doing it in 24, you've already set the budget. We know what it is this year. But in going forward in July, we'll be looking forward for next year. So trying to square the circle there to what resources you're going to have. And you won't know that. The draft budget settlement won't be out until December 24. And if the indication is it's going to be 0, then, great about Project Zero, but what you're actually going to drop off the end, because something will have to give. And I think that's the concern for me. And in a realistic world, I believe a 2-year plan is better than a 5-year plan, because I bet if you look at in 5 years hence, you won't have delivered what you said you were going to deliver now. The other question I got is October 24, you've got the 7th of October, 8-week consultation commences including scrutiny committees. I was just going to ask whether that includes us as well. Are we going to be consulted with, or are we there just to provide that assurance going forward? And the other questions I was going to pose is within the timescale or within the calendar, whilst we're engaged in the end-of-year corporate risk register reports on a quarterly basis, we are not engaged on the end-of-year annual development delivery plan performance report. We're not engaged in that whatsoever, and I'm just asking basically whether we should be, because obviously if it's the same as a quarterly risk register, then surely to gain the assurance of the council delivering what it needs to deliver, we should be providing that assurance as well as a committee. And the other thing was, I picked up something here, development of performance arrangements to deliver a corporate plan December 24, which I think Councillor Goodjohn mentioned. I'm just wondering whether we would be engaged as Governance and Audit Committee members in that. So hopefully I didn't go too far off tangent, but I think there are some realities checks here that whilst the 5-year plan is an aspiration, if you're going to deliver it, it needs to be organic, because it does need to change once you know where your budget's coming from.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the question around involving the committee in that 8-week consultation, absolutely. If members would welcome the opportunity in this forum to be formally consulted on the corporate plan, absolutely, more than happy to bring that here. And also just to confirm that we would obviously extend the invitation to those stakeholder events through involvement engagement stage to lay members as well as elected members. I think the question that you posed around Governance and Audit Committee having oversight of corporate performance reports, I think that you probably see the most pertinent elements of those in terms of the regulatory report recommendations on a 6-monthly basis. And obviously we bring the reports to you as they're published and go through the system. And really importantly, that corporate performance work feeds into the annual governance statement that colleagues in internal audit will also be providing to you. So as part of that kind of system of controls and assurance, you see the progress against it in that way. I think that the point that you were making, Chair, in terms of should it be 1 or 2 years as a plan or 5 years, is a really interesting one. And actually, there is an argument that a 5-year plan, when we're talking about the outcomes that we want to achieve for residents, is actually too short, because lots of the things that we're talking about doing will take longer than 1, 2 or 5 years to deliver. And I think that's where the point you made about balancing ambition with realism is really important. The current thinking is that we would look at developing that 5-year plan, setting those kind of outcomes that we would look to achieve at the end of those 5 years. I think the consideration that we need to give is, at the moment, we've got an annual delivery plan where we translate that 5-year ambition down to a set of deliverable things within budget for that year ahead. I think the theory of that is really sound. I'm not sure in reality actually how that's breaking down those actions and how different that annual delivery plan is in reality every year. So I think the trick and what will be really useful to get feedback from this committee and other members is actually what's the best mechanism for those annual plans. Some initial thoughts that we've had is, rather than having 16 service plans, do we have 5 director or directorate plans? So in effect, they could become the business plans for each directorate. As elected members, you would be able to see the progress that is expected to be made in that year as a bridge to a 5-year corporate plan. Certainly if you speak with colleagues from Future Generations Commission's office, and they led a very good session with us, the starting point was, okay, what do you think you want to look like by 2030, but also what do you want to be doing by 2050 and 2100 as well. So, but you are right, that ambition needs to be balanced with the realism of what we're actually going to be able to do.
Before I've got colleagues in, I think that's the very pertinent point. You know, when I was in local government, we were looking at 2050 and 2100, you know, and, you know, conversations were had with the Future Generations. You know, we don't know where we are next year, let alone in 2050. It can be very aspirational, but, you know, how you deliver it. And I think it's very pertinent, I think, the point you made around whether you do directorate annual plans, because that's the only way you can work at the moment, because it's an annual budget, is, you know, the directorates guided by council set what the priorities are. And clearly, if the budget shrinks, things will drop off. And, you know, rather than have this, you know, the scrap between teams of people over money, because that's what it is, it ends up at, is what are the priorities, A, for the council and B, for the directorate. So, yeah, very key. But, you know, thanks very much for that clarification. Councillor Goodjohn and then Councillor Hooper.
I'll warn Tom that he's opening a Pandora's box here, where I wish that scrutiny committees were linked up with directorates, which were linked up with cabinet members as to responsibilities, rather than being slightly different in each one. But I'll park that discussion for now and for quite a while. But I would say if Tom will equivocate, then I will launch a defence of the 5-year plan. I think long-term thinking is a very important part of what we do as a council, and it's been part of what has led us to quite a few good decision-making procedures. And additionally, when it comes to cabinet members, it makes them think longer term, I would say. And one example I would give is the free school meals reserve, which ended up being what was made us capable of rolling out free school meals faster than any other council in Wales to all primary school children. Now, there are pluses and minuses. For example, it means we have to think further on a financial basis during uncertainty, which leads us to perhaps even holding too much money in reserve, as one member might say. But in some ways, that has made us resilient, more resilient as an organisation to things like the cost of living crisis, to inflation. So there are pluses and minuses. I'm personally of the opinion that 5 years is a good amount of time. We do need to consider longer term risks as well. And although that never goes away fully, if you don't have a corporate plan to deal with those risks, I would struggle to see how that's being kept under the radar outside of the risk register, which, no criticism of the risk register, is not the immediate focus of every director, of every cabinet member whenever they're making a decision. So, thought to go into that, absolutely, but I would say there are definitely pluses to 5-year plans, and particularly the corporate plan as it works now, as much of a critic of it as I have been in the past.
Thank you for that, Councillor Goodjohn. A debate for another day. Councillor Hooper.
I think you've opened up an interesting conversation, Chair, and I think Tom's response was also interesting. I think we've got I'm going to, because Councillor Goodjohn brought in the absolute need for us to get to the net zero. So 2030 is upon us within this plan. This becomes really quite like next 5 minutes type stuff. But I think we've also got to make sure that we're a lot more agile as an organisation. And I think corporate plans can sometimes stick you in a box where you're just stuck with something without being able to change. Because when you change from priorities, I think it's one of those things that comes with political risks that often dissuade leaders from taking those decisions, because it means you're changing your chart and your course. We wouldn't have known 10 years ago or even 5 years ago that we've had a cost of living crisis that we've had, a war in Europe, and COVID all in one go. And all of those things had material impacts. And some of the stuff, we talk very much about resilience. And as a theoretical game, just go with me for a second. Resilience means that when you have pressures, you stay solid. I think we need to find an organisation that when we have pressures and changes, we learn from them and grow. And that's quite a different, we've talked about cultural stuff once before today. That's a real cultural change that we need to do. Because I fear, despite, I'm sure Councillor Goodjohn will tell me different, but in this new world nirvana of if there's a Labour UK government and that sorts out the problems in Welsh government and sorts out the problems at a council level, that isn't going to be happening. We've got to be in a situation where we are much, much more receptive to change, to risks, because I think they're going to get greater. And I just fear that sometimes if we box ourselves in, that's the worst place we can possibly be. And maybe the answer is there's a theory of change or a theory of where we're going that is clearly articulated by the senior leadership team and at a political and at an organisational level. And that's something that is adaptable over time. But I think that's quite unusual to see in local government for a number of reasons. Thanks for allowing me that, Chair. I've enjoyed that.
Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper, and I like this stuff as well, as you know, and I think it is really interesting that the two most recent corporate plans that have been introduced since the Future Gens legislation came in 2015, 2016. Have spanned across multiple administrations, and I think there is something in the fact that they set a 5-year direction in terms of well-being that is consulted on, in a cross-party way, and means that we have got that kind of direction that is being set. I thought the point that you made around defining resilience versus agility is a really interesting one, and I think that does link to some of the thinking that's underway at the moment in terms of I'd like to see us proposing a simpler, smaller corporate plan, focusing in perhaps on a set of a smaller set of priorities that we can all get behind as an organisation. I think that certainly is the feedback that or the direction of travel that cabinet members are asking for as well, and also making it more accessible or more meaningful for members and importantly residents to look at and see. And I think that ability then to duck and weave and change and be receptive to those headwinds that'll happen over those 5 years. So it's almost the balance, I guess, between where do we want to get to and not being too prescriptive of the steps that we need to be taking, because those are going to be impacted on by events and finance. But yeah, these are definitely the kind of issues that through engagement and consultation, it'll be brilliant to get your views and that of other members as well.
And again, going back to the previous report, I think a lesser number of priorities would put you in a better stead, because again, people think they need to be a priority within a council because it makes them important. Actually, what needs to be said is you are important, but it's sort of a just-a-day operational matter. But these are the strategic issues for this council going forward. So you are important in the service you deliver, but these are it, and everyone signs up to it. And again, it comes down to communication, because people then, if they feel, that they are part of it, great. If you don't communicate it right, they'll feel left out. And I think we've all been through that on a corporate plan. Everyone wants to be in there as a priority. Okay, I think we've had a good amount of debate there. Any other comments from anyone? No? Okay, the recommendation, I think, is only number 5 for us. That we're now fully aware of the proposals, and obviously, Tom, you can pick up the points that have been raised here and feed them back into the Cabinet, Council and senior leadership team. So anyone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, seconded by Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? No, thank you. We're on to item 6 then, which is the Audit Wales Work Programme, 23-24 Vale Glamorgan Council. And is Sarah Jane doing that directly? Sarah, thank you for waiting patiently.
Hi, absolutely no problem, Chair. I'm going to assume that members have actually read most of this, and I thought it'd be helpful really just to go through some of the changes and updates since we issued this. So in terms of the financial audit side of things, just to reiterate on the 23-24 statement of accounts work, that planning work is underway, it's on track. So we're still looking to meet the timescales that we set out there. Also to update you that in terms of the 22-23 grant claims work, the work around housing benefits, that is also ongoing. But just to say that the council is it's a similar position that we've got with other councils. So the council isn't out of kilter with others on that. So yeah, those are the kind of key updates on the financial audit side. In terms of the performance audit side, we've talked about the performance information, the national summary report. Just to say that on the digital, there will also be a digital national summary report. They'll be coming out about the same time, so July time. So just wanted to make you aware of that. In terms of one thing I should say on the 23-24 performance audit work, apologies, just where it says thematic review commissioning, it says draft PB. That should say draft project brief. That's an acronym we use. That's not one that everyone uses. So just to be clear, that's what that means. And then that the thematic review on financial sustainability. So that's a piece of work that we're doing at all 22 councils. That is very much underway. We'll be looking to kind of issue draft reports pretty soon to the councils. But also we will be doing a national summary report on that one as well. Obviously, you're aware that we've already completed the review of planning. That was back in the autumn. Just in terms of our local government national studies, just to say that that report on the national parks has been published. It's available on our website. And also useful to for you to be aware that in terms of the governance piece of work around the fire and rescue authorities, where it says that there hasn't been no fieldwork planned at the Vale of Glamorgan Council, just to explain that we have undertaken engagement with those members who are representatives on those fire authorities. There was a survey issue, so they have had an opportunity to engage that way. A couple of other bits and pieces to make you aware of some of the updates, really. For example, around the SDIN and CIW updates, there have been some reports that say they're awaiting publication. So, for example, the Joint Inspection Child Protection Arrangement report for Cardiff, that has now been published and is available on the Care Inspectorate Wales website. Similarly, the Performance Evaluation Inspection from Monmouthshire County Council, that is also available on CIW's website. I'm just trying to think, there's a couple of other updates really is on our Audit Wales national reports. You might be aware that that community pharmacy data pilot that has also been published on our website, as has the A465 section 2 update. So just that'll be helpful to kind of give you a bit of an update on some of those aspects. But I'm just trying to think, I think that was the main things I wanted to raise, but happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Are there any questions from anyone? Councillor Goodjohn?
Yeah, just since the writing of this report, has there been any update on the homelessness piece of work? I think that's absolutely crucial, especially to this authority at this time after a response from Welsh Government, but also for our budgets and for our people locally after the homelessness crisis that has begun since COVID-19. Has there been any update as to when that work's going to begin? And will there be any consideration of the work before the or during the pandemic, before this recent rapid rehousing strategies were put in place, where we were also attempting to prevent rough sleeping for a very long time has been the policy of this council, to prevent it under any circumstances. So any more information with that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councillor. Just to say that if that work is still being scoped, I don't yet know the definitive timescales of that, other than I can say we feel it is a really important piece of work. So we're definitely committed to doing that. I'll get some more information and come back to you out of committee with some firmer idea of when we're looking to do that piece of work. I'm not sure that it will take account of the position pre-COVID, but again, once I know a bit more about the scope of that, I can let you know. I think from talking to the team previously, it was also thinking about, having a focus around temporary accommodation and what is being done to help address some of that. But, I'm not saying that's the scope definitively. So I guess what I'm saying is I'll come back to you with a bit of details on that, if that's okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I've just got a couple, Sarah Jane, in regards to page 2, which is, and I'm just going off a bit of a tangent here a minute, audit of the 22-23 Joint Committee accounts hosted by the Council. This committee is asked to meet with the City Deal, and we keep getting told that the City Deal accounts haven't been signed off. I'm just wondering whether you know, or whether you could get an indication as to when they're going to be signed off, in order that this committee can speak to representatives of the City Deal. I apologise for taking advantage of Matt, because I know Matt's not here, but it would be worthwhile to know, has the accounts been signed off yet? And if they have, then obviously we could make an approach then to see the officers. I don't know whether you've got any information on that.
Just to say, Chair, I know that there have been some, at that point, the last I heard, I think that was about to happen, but I will double check and come back to you rather than saying yes or no definitively. So I'll come back and check and we can feed that back to you. I'll also make Matt aware of that. Well, Matt will be aware as well, won't he? But yeah, I'll come back to you, Chair, on that.
That's lovely. The next question is on page 6, which you've already raised, which is the governance in fire and rescue authorities, a matter I've raised previously in committee as to why the councils won't be involved. I know that, obviously, I think you've told me in another committee I attend that the questionnaire has gone out to the representative who's nominated to sit on the Fire and Rescue Service. But I'm just wondering why that questionnaire hasn't gone to the authority, because it is the authority that actually is a member of the Fire and Rescue Service, and obviously Fire and Rescue levy a payment on the council. And all I'm just a bit concerned about is that, I'm not saying they wouldn't, but if the elected member actually misses the email or the survey, whether the council has any response, and if that questionnaire has gone to the council and whether it's responded, I don't know.
Yes, just to say that what we tend to do is we will engage with the council where we aren't getting responses from various members. So we do tend to do that because we want to make sure that councils or their representatives have an opportunity to engage. That's a pretty traditional mechanism that we use. In terms of your specific question as to why the council as a whole wasn't engaged on that piece of work, I guess effectively we were coming at it very much from the kind of FRA perspective. But I will double check to see whether there was a different rationale to that. But certainly we wanted to engage with those elected members who represented the council and those bodies, if you see what I'm saying. But again, I don't know the ins and outs of that piece of work. So I do need to come back to you. Sorry, I'm not doing very well with your questions today, Chair. So it's going to be a number of things that I'll pick up with you and come back out of committee on that.
No, that's no problem. I just get a little bit, given the elected members have been removed, they've had all their powers removed at the moment, and they're commissioners in the Fire and Rescue Service, then obviously it's only right and proper that the council, I would have thought, gives a view, because the elected member may give a completely contrary view because they've now been removed from the process, so that would be welcome. The next point I would like to raise, I just like a question. On page 14 of the report, there's a title of a national report which says the Senior Public Service.
Testing. Hello. Testing. Testing. Sarah, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry, you broke up just then. I just heard a query about the Senior Public Service and then cut off. So sorry, you may want to repeat that. Sorry, Chair.
Can you hear me now, Sarah?
Yes, I can.
That's okay. Apologies. I think I got a problem with my microphone. I just wanted to know what the Senior Public Service covers, because no one knows.
Yeah, I'll find out for you and come back to you. I don't have the answer, I'm afraid. I'm not leading on that piece of work.
No,
so
that's okay. Don't worry.
I wouldn't like to hazard a guess, so it's not right for me to do that.
That's okay. And now this is me being very pedantic, as I always am. Pages 15 and 16, the title of the Good Practice Exchange events was Audit Committees. We don't have audit committees in local government anymore. The 2021 legislation changed it to governance and audit. So I'm just wondering, next time, could Wales or Audit Wales sort of say governance and audit exchange?
Yes, I of course take that on board. I think the event was also aimed at other bodies outside of council, so who would have audit committees. But yeah, we're obviously very much aware that the name has changed.
No, that's okay. Thank you very much. Okay, are there any other questions? No, any comments? No? Okay, we got the recommendation. We note the content of the report. And obviously the matter be referred to Cabinet for their oversight. Someone move, please. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Seconded, Councillor Goodjohn. Thank you very much. Anyone against? Nope. Thank you, Sarah Jane. You can stay if you want, but you can leave if you want as well.
If it's okay, Chair, I'm afraid I am going to have to leave. I know that it's the internal audit things, and I know I've been to other committees where they present it. But if there are any further queries or questions from me, please do just email me and I'll come back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah Jane. Thanks for your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Item 7 then, the annual internal audit report 23-24. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Evening, members. Evening, Chair. This is one of the key documents that I bring to committee's attention in the year, and it's my annual internal audit report with my annual opinion, giving you an overall opinion on the assurance of the adequacy of the internal controls, governance arrangements and risk management processes of the Council. The headlines are that it's a positive report in that the opinion is positive with a reasonable level of assurance. We've covered 83% of our agreed plan, and we've issued a number of audit opinions on individual audit jobs, 82% of which are positive. So in terms of the public sector internal audit standards, this is one of the key reports I have to bring into Governance and Audit Committee to make you aware of. We need to make sure that I provide the opinion, as mentioned, present a summary of the audit work which we've undertaken, and that's an update of where we are in terms of the quarterly reports I bring to committee, bring to your attention any issues, provide a summary of the performance of the team, and comment on our conformance with the public sector internal audit standards. So, Chair, I don't intend to go through the report in detail, but I would like to go through some highlights if I could. So, thanks, Chair. So in terms of the overall opinion, as I said, that is a reasonable level of assurance. And that is made up of individual audits which we undertake during the year based on the audit plan that's agreed by the committee. Just for a bit of background, as I'm sure all members will be aware now, the initial agreement for the Regional Internal Audit Service was for 4 partners, Vale, Bridgend, Merthyr and RCT. And we were coming up to our 5-year renewal agreement as in April 24. Ron the Cenotaph have given notice that they do not wish to continue with the partnership for no performance or relationship issues, and have been very positive in terms of their commentary about the internal audit service they've had for the last 5 years. So moving forward into 24-25, we will operate on a 3-partner model for the Regional Internal Audit Service. The reviews we undertake at a local level and the opinions we issue are noted at 2.2, and there's a list of our substantial, reasonable, limited and no assurance with the appropriate definition alongside. Within Table 2, members will note we've issued 56 opinion-related audits across a range of different opinions, across a range of different audit activity. Substantial and reasonable are positive, hence the 82% positive opinions. And where we've issued limited opinions, the majority of that information has already been brought into committee, and I'll come on to that in a bit more detail. Figure 1 sets out that we've clearly issued more positive opinions than negative opinions. And in Table 3, Para 2.3, we've put a comparison there for the previous year, 22-23, compared to 23-24. Albeit we've done a significantly number of more audit opinions in 23-24. Members will see that the percentages of opinions issued is very comparable year on year. Reassuringly, we've had no assurance opinions in 23-24. With regards to the audit plan and the 83% coverage, that's set out in 2.6, Table 4, where we've issued 51 reports finalised, 5 were drafted at year end, and 16 had no audit opinions related to them or associated with them. We also had some work where we started in 23-24, but did not bring that to draft report stage as at the 31st of March, and that was carried forward into the 24-25 plan. We had some work that was in the plan that we didn't start, that's also been carried forward into 24-25 plan. We did have some work which wasn't undertaken during the year, and which has been risk assessed and will not be carried forward into 24-25. In terms of the limited controls and the limited opinions we've issued, those are set out in section 3, Chair. It does state that there are 10 reviews which have received a limited assurance. Members will note that there is information on 9 of those reports in front of you. All of that information as to the reason why we felt they were limited assurance has been brought to committee's attention previously. The limited report on car parks will be brought to you in my next quarterly update in 24-25. Where we have limited opinions, Chair, we will do a follow-up review audit in the following financial year, where the service managers agree an action plan to address the issues we've identified to make the improvements in service delivery. It's reassuring to note that where we had limited assurance previously and we have followed those audits up, that sets out in 3.11. We had 4 limiteds, we've done a follow-up audit, and all have resulted in an improved audit opinion being a reasonable level of assurance. Within each audit report, we identify strengths and weaknesses, so we believe that it's a balanced report and give an opinion based on the level of weaknesses and strengths identified. So if you have more strengths within the report, then that's more likely to be a positive opinion, and more weaknesses is more likely to give a negative opinion. The recommendations are categorized as high, medium or low, and that's what we feel in terms of how the risks should be addressed and the timescale of how those particular issues should be addressed by the service managers. We've issued 311 recommendations in our audit reports for 23-24, as set out in Table 5, varying from high, medium and low. We've got a follow-up process within the team for high and medium recommendations. We will do a log to make sure that we receive some evidence from service managers to ensure those recommendations have been implemented. The low recommendations are included in our reports, but the onus is on the service manager to actually implement those particular recommendations. The team from time to time does get involved in some kind of fraud work, as set out in section 5. A separate report will be presented into committee during 24-25 of the work related to 23-24. We have a corporate fraud officer who works solely for the Vale of Glamorgan, and he comes under the management of our team. So we do work in conjunction with the fraud officer in terms of any allegations that come through to us as a joint exercise. We were involved with one fraudulent allegation during the year where there was a change in supplier bank details. Reassuringly, Chair, as I'm sure the report will say, we did initially lose some money, but due to the tenacity of the audit team and the fraud investigator, all of that money was recovered. The team also coordinate the National Fraud Initiative, which is a data matching exercise with 1,200 organisations across the UK, and that successfully identifies potential matches for fraud. They've followed up, and where we can identify fraud or error, that's reported and will be reported in the fraud report. Key performance measures for our team, we use a client satisfaction questionnaire on when we finalise our audits. Unfortunately, this year, 23-24, the return rate was not as good as it has been in previous years, 46%, and that's something we need to work on moving forward. That said, the satisfaction rate of being fed back is 95% from service managers, which is a good position to be in, given that we're not always given a positive opinion to our auditees. We do take on board the comments coming back from the questionnaires. to help improve the service moving forward. And there's some examples there for members to see. To ensure that we're continually delivering a professional internal audit service, we need to make sure our staff are appropriately trained. And we have 2 graduate auditors with us at the moment who are successfully going through their CIPFA exams. And we have 1 or 2 members who are currently doing IIA. Reassuringly, we've had a number in the team also requesting to do further professional training, and we're quite keen to support those moving into 24-25, both on a professional level and a CPD basis as well. We also support staff to do internal training provided by the council. As a team, we have key performance measures, which I've mentioned already, percentage of planned audits completed, recommendations accepted, clients being responses being satisfied with the audit that they receive. That's set out in Table 6, Para 8.1 for information. We've compared ourselves with the Welsh average, with the Welsh Chief Auditor Group average, performance from previous years and 23-24's performance. In terms of completion of the audit plan, we're slightly better than where we were last year and above the average for the Welsh internal audit teams. Percentage of recommendations accepted versus made. We got 100% accept against an average of 98%. The trick there, Chair, though, is to get the recommendations implemented as opposed to accepted. And that's why we bring quarterly reports into committee, and you've received that information in terms of the progress of how we update that during the year. And we've mentioned the clients being satisfied with the audit service they received already. With regards to the public sector internal audit standards, that's one of the reasons how we demonstrate our professionalism. It sets out the mission, the definition for internal audit, includes a code of ethics, and how we must comply in terms of delivery of an internal audit service within the public sector across the UK. Just to note there, Chair, we did have an external assessment back in 22-23. That was reported back into Audit Committee in September 23, which said that we are fully conformant with the public sector internal standards. We do an annual review, just an in-house review, just to make sure that we are on board, and we would take on board any recommendations as a result of either of those assessments. We do operate as a regional internal audit service, as I mentioned previously already, moving into 24-25. That will be based on a three-partner model, and we aim to ensure we are professional, approachable, flexible, independent, but objective, even though we are internal to the organisation. We'll continue to recruit suitable candidates moving forward, and we managed to fill 1 vacant post during 23-24. All of that information, Chair, feeds into my annual statement, which is set out in section 11, split between risk management, governance arrangements and internal control. As you can see, all have been given a reasonable level of assurance based on the work we've undertaken. That then feeds into the overall level of assurance, which is a reasonable assurance as set out in the opinion statement. If I could just refer members to Annex 1, Chair, that is a list of all the opinion audits we've undertaken in 23-24, the respective opinion and the number of recommendations we've made in each of those reports. Annex 2 sets out the progress we made against the agreed plan and the status of each individual audit, again with the opinions and the recommendations made. Appendix 3 identifies the recommendations we've made and whether or not they've been implemented, given the timescale agreed by the service manager, any that are overdue, plus the future target date. Annex 4, Chair, is just some information around our client satisfaction questionnaire, just for members' information. So there's quite a comprehensive report, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for that report. Are there any questions? Councillor Goodjohn.
Yeah, can I dig a little deeper on the overall assessment here? So internal control is pretty obvious through the audits that you've taken, but it was very similar, the wording last year, and I just want to make sure we're getting a little deeper than a copy paste. So with the governance arrangements, generally you're happy that apart from an audit I shall not mention, generally governance arrangements are good within the council and you're satisfied, and the reasoning behind only a reasonable assurances behind the schools. And have you got any other concerns that haven't been mentioned there? Additionally, with risk management, you've only given us reasonable assurance. You've mentioned part of the reason being because you're not able to eliminate all risks, which is never possible within an organisation, not one in the real world at least. But looking back, you've mentioned the risk register, which makes sense to be the main document you draw from. We've got a lot of high risks, and I think that's very reflective of what's going on at the moment between we've mentioned it so many times, but Project Zero, but also cost of living and the financial situation going forward. I would say, however, when it comes to risk management, it's how well are we managing these? In which case, I would say the opposite is true. I would say we're generally doing a really good job of managing these risks and of trying to keep ourselves from stretching too thin on the ground, while also trying to be ambitious on the whole. And perhaps that's a bit too much praise, but on the whole, I would say we're doing extremely well on risk management. So what of the two are you more looking for when it comes to risk management? And can you give us more feedback as to why it's reasonable and how we can improve that potentially to substantial in the future?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the opinions are based on the work that we undertake during the year. And we've got limited resources, so we can't cover everything that the organisation delivers, all the services and all the systems that it operates, unfortunately. There's limited resources in the team, so we have to prioritise in terms of the planning process, which was another report which will be brought to your attention later this evening. So we do try and cover all of those issues. We do cover internal control, governance arrangements and risk management processes within the scope of each audit. That is the minutiae, unfortunately, and that's not reported into committee. But we have to take a view on terms of the adequacy of those arrangements that are in place on an individual basis, and then build that up over time. So the overall opinion is based on the number of substantial, number of reasonable, number of limited opinions we've issued during the year, which does take into account at a very detailed level those three elements. The risk management, the risk register is important and is taken into account in terms of our planning process. And on a cyclical basis, we will pick up some key risks to audit specifically to make sure that the authority is doing what it says it is doing to minimise the risk moving forward. But as I said, limited resources means we can't look at the whole risk register every single year. But that's how we arrive at our overall opinions.
Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. So I've got 4 questions, which was 5, so thank you for that. First one is just checking. So this opinion takes into account the 5 draft reports that are currently out. So I was just looking for confirmation, not expecting any significant changes to those. That's question 1. Question 2 is...
Sorry, Chair, can I answer each one?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Chair. Thanks.
That's nice and quick. Thank you. Second one is regarding the performance measures and just looking at particularly at client satisfaction. I'm glad you picked out the 46%. I think that is something definitely you need to improve, and I guess that's perhaps one for management more than the audit team to chase up in terms of making sure that actually they're making sure their departments are responding to that one. But my specific question is in 6.3 and then later in 8.4 in the report, you refer to a satisfaction rate of 95%. I looked at the questions, and 10 out of the 12 questions appeared to me to be yes/no questions. I couldn't work out how you'd get to a satisfaction level of 95%. And also, because I assume that would be based on a very satisfied, not satisfied, that sort of criteria. But also, it would be great to see around sort of 6.2, 6.3, a graph with each of the 10 questions with the response rates to show performance against each of those questions, so that we could see as well, is there a particular area where you might need support in improving? So that's question 2, if you want to take that one.
Thanks. Thank you for the question. Yeah, in terms of the overall percentage, it is based on the number of yeses and the number of nos. But we do offer the opportunity for our auditees to comment on the adequacy of the service that's been provided at the conclusion of the audit. It's something that we've been using for a number of years. It was fairly standard across Welsh Chief Auditors Group. Always looking to improve those, so we could certainly incorporate a range of answers moving forward. That's not a problem. In terms of the graph to be included next time, we'll certainly consider that and work on that during the year. I don't know if in terms of the 46%, we do report the information into SLT, into directors, so they're aware of the performance of the team overall, and that information gets circulated then through to the respective DMTs, the department management teams.
Great, thank you. I suppose question 3 to think about is probably more of a comment, which is just regarding the 10 that are limited assurance. Obviously, there's some that are news to us at this point. Corporate safeguarding was one that jumped out as me of particular concern. I think I asked about that at the last meet. No, I couldn't get on board with the last one because of IT issues. The one before that, I think I asked about it in terms of whether it was going to be completed. So really pleased to see it's been completed. But again, limited assurance. And that links through to Annex 3, where there's recommendations outstanding from the last audit they did in 2021. So I think just assurance that there's action being taken around that area in particular, and that we'll get to see that report pretty quickly as well, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thanks for the question. That information has been reported into committee. The details are shown at 3.10. In terms of the concerns we had originally, there was an ongoing issue that we've had to work with the Director of Social Services to make sure we were on the same page to move that forward. I've spoken to the directors personally. It's been taken to SLT and discussed at length at SLT, so we are moving that forward, Chair. And we will be reporting the outcome back into committee in due course.
Great, thank you. And I think you're lucky. I think I've actually joined up 2 questions together there, so I think you've escaped my 4th question. But if you do want any feedback on the questionnaires, I've got some other examples that I can give as well. So happy to feed those in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nigel. Are there any other questions? Matthew? Oh, sorry, Councillor Prothero. Matthew first and then you, Councillor Prothero. Matthew Evans first. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I will leave it 2 questions for me, Andrew. First one, I just wanted to check on follow-ups. On the limited assurance one. I think I read in table 3 there was 8 from 2022 to 23, but I could only see then we'd done 4 follow-ups in the last year's plan. So I just wanted to check what had happened to the other 4, if I'm reading that right. And then secondly, more of just a general question about whether there was, in your work as a whole, you bring that together to do your kind of reasonable assurance and your internal control assessment. But were there any key risk themes across all those reviews that you can pick out that adds value to the risk management process of the council?
Okay, thank you, Matthew. We'll check on the follow-ups, and we may need to get back to you on that one. In terms of the overall themes, that's something we we report all our final reports into the directors, and I provide a summary to SLT on a fairly regular basis. What we don't do at the moment is tease out any themes across all of the audits which we've undertaken. That's something we could potentially look to do moving forward into 24-25.
Councillor Prothero.
Thank you, Chair. My question is related to one of the carried forward actions, which was to do with contract monitoring, and also high priorities for review, procurement, contract management. Now, these have actually been, I think, on the horizon for the last couple of years. And I understand that there is hope that they'll be done this year, 24-25. I'm just wondering, with procurement reform coming in October, and also the work that the council's doing with Ardell, at what point will you initiate these audits this year? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. If I can just pick up the procurement one that was being carried forward. It has started. What we've decided to do, because of Ardell and all the changes, we're doing an initial fact-finding state quite high-level audit to start with, to get a position statement of where we are, what is available to colleagues within the Vale of Glamorgan, and then once Ardell and the new legislation comes in, we'll do a deeper dive then into that later in the year. So I just wanted to give you some assurance that the initial procurement piece of work is almost finished, the one that was ongoing at the end of the year, but we will pick it up further on in Q4 to do a deeper dive.
Are there any other questions? Are there any comments? No, I'm going to make some comments. I think the issue around the limited number of matters which remain outstanding, I think I seem to have missed some of these, and whilst some the directors have had quite a difficult time coming in and accounting for the limited matters, Tom being one, and obviously Matt being another, and others. There's substantial amounts still outstanding, and actually there are some outstanding from 2022-23. And if you actually look at the section 3, we've got payment card industries, which we've not addressed. We've got the appointee and deputy services that we've not addressed, and that one gives me some concern, given that there's some significant accounts that I assume people have unfortunately passed away, and the money's still in the council coffers and not been returned to legal owners. We got issues around libraries. The officer's code of conduct concerns me, because in the report it says it's the review date is now 3 years overdue. It's now 4 years overdue from January 2020. We've got adult placements. And we've got corporate safeguarding, which has been mentioned by Nigel. And again, the issue which Nigel raised, it was picked up in 2021 as a reasonable, but it's now back on the list as a limited. And then there are the others, which are attendance and sickness recording, civil enforcement, and governance and performance review, the local authority trading company. So all those are outstanding. And rather than have a meeting where we call in the executive team, I should imagine, one by one, to deal with each of these items, what I was going to suggest to committee is whether we ask the director or the head of service to provide an update on these matters for us to consider at the next meeting. So rather than Andrew and his team to run around after this, we as a committee ask each of the directors and head of service who've got responsibility for those limited matters which still remain outstanding. As Nigel said, we've still got one outstanding from 2021 on corporate safeguarding, but there are no others outstanding, and that they provide reports to committee. I know we're in July next, aren't we, Tom, I think, which is the next committee, but hopefully it will concentrate some minds to get these matters being dealt with, because, as I said, there are some serious concerns on some of these. Corporate safeguarding is always a big issue and a big concern, and so it should be. But the issues about officers' code of conduct, 4 years out of date, and again, thank you for that, Andrew. So, if I could ask that those matters made, if people look through the appendix, payment card industries, appointees and deputy services, libraries, officers' code of conduct, adult placements, corporate safeguarding. I know we've got a car park one which is just been issued, but that needs to come forward, and those others, civil enforcement, governance, and attendance and sickness recording, unless you're going to tell me otherwise, no, Andrew. I think they all need to give us an explanation as to why these matters have not been dealt with, and when are they actually going to be dealt with? Because again, we can then consider whether or not we need to speak to the head of service or the director. So that would be my additional recommendation to here, that we have these report by next committee. Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, we can certainly ask heads of service directors for an update in terms of progress or where they are with that particular action plan, the agreed action plan. Just need to clarify, we're talking about Annex 3, where we're identifying the number of recommendations made, implemented, overdue, etc. There's a future target date as the right-hand column. So within the action plan, the service manager stroke head of service has identified that they will implement the particular recommendation, but at a point in time, which is in the future. That hasn't been achieved yet. That date hasn't arrived. So we can certainly check with the directors in terms of where they are. It's not outstanding recommendations. They've agreed a timescale to implement that recommendation by. The team are checking on a regular basis to make sure that happens with the evidence. But that date hasn't arrived at yet. So we just need to make sure we're on the same wavelength there, Chair.
Yeah, I understand that, Andrew, but for us as a governance and audit committee to get the assurance that these matters are being taken seriously, these could be pushed off into the long grass. We've got one which we got 2021. We're now in 2024, 3 years of, I don't know whether it's the same recommendation or whatever. So all I'm asking for is that, because what we don't want is them being pushed into the long grass. And we need that assurance as a committee to these matters being taken seriously, so they can deal with that in their response back to us. But that's the only point I would make. Nigel?
Yeah, I think it's just obviously we've got a responsibility to make sure that there is appropriate governance and assurance processes around the risks facing the organisation. I don't think I feel comfortable as a member having a recommendation that was raised in August 2021 that still has a future date for implementation. I think if that's the case, I think as a committee, we need to see that recommendation, see their management response, and actually say whether we agree with that or not. And I'm happy for the report you suggest. I think the key bit is if there is one that's going to take that long to implement, or for example, if that there's some reason why it's going to take that long, whatever that reason might be, I need to understand the compensating controls that are going to be in place. Because something like corporate safeguarding, you can't just not safeguard people for that length of time. So I think it's just understanding what it is that we're exposed to as an organisation by that length of time and what's being done to manage that risk in the meantime. It might be absolutely the right decision, but I don't feel comfortable having no idea what that recommendation is. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. And I was going to also put a recommendation number 3 in as well, in regards to the low response to the satisfaction questionnaire. And that recommendation is that the SLT be made aware from Andrew and his team which teams of individuals are not responding to the questionnaire, so that the director can take appropriate action in regards to picking it up. you know, I know people are very busy. We had that at the last committee, you know, people shortage of staff and that. But I should imagine the questionnaire only takes about 3 or 4 minutes to fill in, and so be it. So, and again, we're talking about performance again here. If people are not prepared to fill this in, so you know, where are we going? So that would be my recommendation 3, that SLT be told of where they are not coming from. Any other comments? No. Okay, so the recommendations then are that we note the annual internal report for 23-24 financial year, including the head of the internal audit annual opinion on the adequacy and the effectiveness of the council's framework of governance, risk management, internal control. Recommendation 2, that written reports be obtained from the directors or heads of service for the next meeting, namely the 17th of July, on the outstanding limited matters. That doesn't include leisure debtors and that, because we dealt with those last time. And item 3 is that the SLT be advised by the head of the regional internal audit service of those departments who are not responding. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Burke. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Goodjohn, thank you. Anyone against? Nope. Thank you very much. We've got the internal audit, regional internal audit shared service charter 24-25. Okay, Andrew, I should imagine everyone's read it, but you know, just pick up some salient points if you want.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the internal audit charter for 24-25. We review it every year, update it as necessary, and we need to provide it in terms of the compliance with our public sector internal audit standards. Again, I won't go through it in detail, Chair, but I'll just pick up the key points in terms of what we've reviewed and changed. But this is a key document in terms of how we operate as an internal audit team, the relationships we have, the access rights we have within the organisation, and how we deal with our reporting processes, both into the service manager, SLT, and yourselves as governance and audit committee. The key changes are picked up in para 2.3. It now reflects the fact that we're moving into 24-25. We're a 3-partner operating regional internal audit service. There's reference made to the global internal audit standards, which have been reviewed. They came into play in January 24 to become effective 2025. The UK Public Sector Internal Audit Standards Board Advisory Board is currently reviewing those standards to see what impact they would have on the existing public sector internal audit standards. And if there is any impact, that will be rolled out to us as auditors to become effective from 1st of April 2025. It picks up the fact that we now refer to the anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy, which is a recommendation made by our external assessors. And also, in terms of the external assessors, it picks up or states that we were fully conforming with the public sector internal audit standards as a result of the peer assessment in 23. And that has been reported to all of the partners' governance and audit committees. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions? Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. Just one point of accuracy on the definition of internal audit on page 3, not on the definition itself, obviously, but it states there regarding the board, the internal audit activity is established and defined by the board, hereafter referred to as the Governance and Audit Committee. I just wonder whether that would be more accurately something like delegated to the Governance and Audit Committee. I'm happy with it either way, really, but it just sounds a bit odd because we're not the board. So I guess it's the board in terms of the IIA terminology that's using rather than the council. So again, I just thought maybe some clarification around that, but totally not a big issue.
Thanks. Yeah, that's standard questioning from the public sector internal audit. It needs to define the board, and it refers to the board as the Governance and Audit Committee. So yeah, because it covers other organisations. But we'll certainly take that on board and reflect on that comment here.
Any other questions? Any comments from anyone? No, you see the recommendation then that I would suggest we note and approve the Regional Internal Audit Service Charter for 24-25 as attached in Appendix A to this report. Someone prepared to move? Nigel, seconder. Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? No, thank you. Item 9 then, the Internal Audit Strategy and Risk-Based Plan. Joan?
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide members of the committee with the annual internal audit strategy and risk-based plan for 24-25 for approval. So the internal audit strategy is at Appendix A. The strategy recognises that for 24-25, the Regional Internal Audit Service will be a three-partner model, and the plan therefore takes account of the resources available to us. The strategy sets out the requirements of internal audit as per the standards and the Accounts and Audit Wales regulations. The strategy includes the definition of internal audit as per the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, the Section 151 Officer Responsibility, and the information to be provided to this committee. It outlines the methodology used to develop the risk-based annual plan and the approach taken when the team undertake audits. The proposed risk-based plan for 24-25 is at Appendix B. The plan provides the committee with an overview of the work to be undertaken, which will offer sufficient coverage to provide an overall annual opinion at year end. The Governance and Audit Committee will receive regular updates on the progress of the plan and any changes that may be required during the year. The plan has been shared with SLT, who had an opportunity to comment. The plan provides the committee with the audit areas to be reviewed, a proposed outline scope for each and a priority rating. The plan includes the 6 audits that were ongoing and therefore carry forward into the 24-25 plan from 23-24 and the 7 audits that were not started in the 23-24 plan. I'd also like to draw committee's attention to the fact that 2 of the ongoing audits carry forward and 2 of the audits not started and therefore included in the 24-25 plan were originally in the 22-23 audit plan. So that's 4 out of the 20 that have been carried forward again. Committee should note that 2 of the ongoing audits carry forward, I've just said that. That there are currently 59 items listed in Appendix B, 44 opinion-related audits and 15 which will not necessarily provide an audit opinion. That's from item 45 onwards in the appendice. You will also note provision is in the plan for follow-up work, which is item 1. That is to undertake audits that have previously been given only limited assurance. Financial systems, item 13, ICT audits, item 18, and school coverage, item 33. These programmes will be developed during the year, and audits completed under these headings will be reported as they progress, so those lines will grow. Therefore, we are happy that the proposed annual plan will provide sufficient coverage to provide an overall annual audit opinion for the year end, whilst being flexible to allow for changing circumstances and events as they may occur, such as requests to respond to issues as they emerge. I think that's all I'd like to say, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Hooper?
Thanks, Joan. At the previous meeting, we did reference the fact that there may be other councils who are interested in joining the group, and I appreciate that was under part 2, so we won't reference them. But how does this strategy, how capable is this strategy of reflecting that if that happened? And I suppose, is there a likelihood of it happening?
Thanks. Sorry. Yes, there is a contingency built in, so we have the flexibility. So if that does happen, we've got enough. We're happy that we've got enough resource in place to do that as soon as that comes on board.
Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. So 3 from me. 9.6 says where there is a need for material changes to the plan, a revised plan will be submitted to the Governance and Audit Committee for endorsement. I just wondered if you had an idea of what material meant. Do you want me to ask them individually, or do you want to go with that one?
Yeah, that's it's not the same as materiality for the accounts. It would be a significant issue that was brought to our attention or we identified that we would then discuss with the head of finance and the corporate director to make sure that they felt it was significant and material enough to change the plan. It could be a change in risk profile, could be significant issues such as loss of key members of staff, which were unknown at the time, or systems failure. So we would need to consider each issue on its own merits through a reporting mechanism. But there's no definition really of materiality. It's significant in terms of our view and Section 151 and the directors.
Thank you, because obviously there have been previous years, obviously the plan is only 83, I think it was, % complete this time. So obviously some things do get rolled on anyway. So it's just clarifying that's not a change to the plan. So, but just something to consider really in terms of that, what is material then. Second question then is in terms of the resource requirement 10.1. It says, if the situation arises where in-house resource not able to deliver the agreed number of audit days, the head of internal audit will look to alternative sources to enable completion of the plan. Now, I know in previous years, staff resources has been quoted as a reason for why work wasn't carried out, and in particular around high priority audits. So I just want to check how that might work for 24, 25. And again, you know, when does that happen rather than just postponing an audit?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. Auditing is not an exact science. It varies from the ability to do the work, the evidence that we're provided with in terms of undertaking the work. Depends on when we can actually undertake the work. It all goes into the mix in part in terms of when we allocate the work to individual auditors for them to be able to undertake the necessary work. Like, for example, we can't do schools in school holidays, so we have to prioritise in terms of some of the work which we undertake. The plan is built on the level of resources we've got within the team to provide the level of assurance we need across all partners. So for 23-24, we took on board an external internal audit provider, and we also took on an agency individual to help us work through that audit plan. As you can see from the Welsh average, hardly any of the internal audit teams complete 100% of their plan for a number of reasons, and we'd like to, you know, where we can, bring that information to you as a committee. But we do need to reprioritise some of the work from time to time, which means that some of the work will fall off. The risk profile might change, or things happen where we just can't do the work for whatever reason. And that's a discussion we have with the service managers at the time. If I feel there's a concern and we're being bumped and are being pushed into the long grass, then it's my plan at the end of the day. So I'll make sure that we do the coverage and escalate that through to Section 151 and director if there's a need to do that. But we do plan to deliver 100% of the plan, albeit we know that things happen during the year which we need to accommodate.
That's great, thank you. That's reassuring that we can go out and get that additional resource where it's required, and you do need that additional support. So that's useful, thank you. And last one regarding the sort of the approach before actually getting onto the detailed internal audit plan. 12.2 says the approach will be the Governance and Audit Committee will be advised of the outcome of the audit and may receive a summary of the findings within the report. I just wonder if we need to actually have a separate bullet in there or add to that around limited assurance reports. And actually, Chair, I might be asking for a recommendation here that this not for next year, but this document gets changed to say that we'll get a summary like we have done for the last few limited assurance ones. So I don't think that's explicit in here, but I'd quite like that to be in there. But I just wanted to, just check that was going to carry forward for the forthcoming year.
Again, fair point, Chair. We do bring significant issues into Governance and Audit Committee, and we've done that during 23-24. In terms of managing that process, if I brought all the issues that we identify into committee, then the meeting would probably go on for a lot longer than it does. So that's why we only bring the key issues. We do only bring limited issues, But point taken, we can certainly look to reword that in the future.
You're asking for it to be reworded now.
Yeah, I think that it would be formally said in here that those, because the ones, as you said, you have been bringing the, well, I'm only talking about the ones that actually would be limited assurance or no assurance, not the others, but those would be a formal requirement that those summary of those findings comes to this committee. That'd be my proposal, please.
Which we do already, Chair.
I think you need to go away and think about it, Andrew, on the basis that this document's for 3 authorities. And if there's a specific requirement for the Vale at Glamorgan, then that specific requirement is just put in for the Vale at Glamorgan, because obviously that's what's being asked for. The rest would remain the same. If the other authorities have signed it off, then they've signed it off. So I assume just for the Vale at Glamorgan, you could just put that bullet point in, which certainly clarifies the matter. You're happy to just go away and look at that?
Yes, Chair.
Anything else, Nigel?
If you want me to go on to the actual detailed audit plan, if you're happy to, Chair. So yeah, there's a few questions on this. We did talk, I went back to, actually, firstly, we've talked about it reflecting the risk register. So I went back to the February risk register I've got, and I can see that there are some examples on here that do reflect the previous risk register we received. So that reassured me that, I know you said before that it's a risk-based plan and you do go back to that. I just wanted to get that assurance myself. I suppose what I don't have visibility of is that the corporate risks, there's 17 on the list that I printed out from February, whether they're covered over a reasonable time frame to give me assurance that they're looked at. So I'm absolutely not saying they're not, but I think if there's a mechanism through which that could be given to us, that would be really useful in terms of assurance over those key risks. Again, I'll leave that one with you. That was brought up last year as well, in the June meeting in 2023 as well. I know we do have at the top of the detailed internal audit plan for 24-25, it does say audit scope / risk, but there isn't any risk information in there. It's only scope information. So I think if we could just add in more risk around this, that would be really useful in terms of context for those reports. And then there's, we did also talk about corporate risk management. You said, again, you'll do a review of a sample of corporate risks. I would still be interested in an overall look at the organisation's risk management as a whole in terms of the processes, rather than specific to like just taking a sample of risk, because that tends to get down into the detail of that risks management rather than how is the overall process working. I can't remember whether you said you'd done that in a reasonable time frame before, so just want to pick up there maybe. 21 is on corporate contracts. Number 10 is contract management. One's cross-cutting, one's corporate resources. So again, just a bit more information about, is there actually a difference between those two? Hybrid council meetings, I wanted to check whether members were going to be consulted on that one as part of the audit. And finally, 31, housing tenancy verification. There's been a massive issue in housing and compliance with the Renting Homes Wales Act around the issuing of electrical certificates. So again, I know that you probably still have to scope that review, but I'd quite like just assurance, maybe outside of the meeting, obviously, that that is going to be covered as well, because that is a significant financial risk for any organisation that has housing tenancies. So just a few points to note there. I don't know whether there's any you can answer now. But
I think the obviously Andrew's at the end of the sausage machine here, so these have all been negotiated with the directors and the heads of service. So I think it's a matter that Andrew's going to have to raise, and Tom can raise it as well at management team to clarify all those issues, Nigel, because they are very pertinent. Obviously, Andrew gets the list, but certainly in regards to, as you quite rightly say, about the structure of corporate risks, I should imagine that's within Tom's directorate. So rather than have a sample, Tom needs to be discussed with to say, look, we want to do, an overall look at them. So Andrew can feed that back and then get the views and no doubt come back to us and say yay or nay as to why the directors don't want it done, or whether they do want it done. And if they don't want it done, then presumably they're quite happy to come along and for that appropriate challenge to take place. Andrew, is that okay?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We'll certainly take that on board. We'll take on board the comments from Nigel as well. In terms of where we are with the plan, obviously we've taken into account the key documents of the organisation in terms of arriving at this plan, and we have an overview of where we think the risk is in each individual audit. The detail of that has not been determined yet in the majority of cases, because we would need to work through the scope. Like, for example, the housing issue, by the time the auditor comes to do the scoping, we would certainly be aware of the key issues involved in the housing situation, and we would incorporate that within our audit process to make sure that we've got some evidence to give you assurance that things are working appropriately and as they should be, and the services being delivered effectively and efficiently. So we'll certainly take that on board, Chair, and we'll feed that back to you in due course.
Yeah, thank you for that, Andrew. You're forewarned now on housing, so you can tell the housing head of service one area that they're going to be looked at in great detail. Councillor Goodjohn.
Yeah, I just wanted to scrutinise the priority system you have in front of here. 8 medium and the rest are high or not applicable. That really doesn't help me in the slightest, quite frankly, as to what you're prioritising. I know with no audit, you want to say it's a low priority, but I'm going to be totally frank with you and say that the hybrid system and whether that's effective is not of the highest priority to me. And I wouldn't even call it medium, frankly, in comparison to some of these, such as budget saving. So I think on some things you are free to say that is a low priority if you want to. What you're putting as NI are required, as in you're required to do it every year and you absolutely can't miss them, such as the overall opinion report. So just rationalise it a little bit, give us something to work with other than everything's high, other than a couple of things would be nice for next year.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, really. In terms of the audit planning process, we always start off with a very long list of what we could potentially do, and we have to whittle that down to a shorter list, and then a short list, depending on the risk of the issue we've identified, following discussions with the service manager and the head of service, and the resources we've got available to do that job. So in essence, everything in this year's plan is high risk, you could argue, because we've whittled it down to a short list. There are some jobs which we have to undertake on an annual basis, the AGS, for example, some grant claim work, but we still categorise those as high or medium or low. We don't categorise anything as low in the plan. It is subjective, Chair. It's based on our cumulative audit knowledge. It's kind of an operational matter as far as we're concerned. But I would reiterate that if it's in the plan, we need to do it.
I think it's very pertinent, though, isn't it? Is that same as prioritising, isn't it, really? You've got, you weed out the wheat from the chaff. You've now got however many, 87 within this. So therefore, someone needs to prioritise all the highs. So which high is high, which high is medium, and which high is low? And it's an issue then for you to negotiate with the director, I would have thought, to say, you sort this out, because ultimately it's not for you to do it, it's for the directors to do it. So now you've got this list of, whatever it is, 87, I think it is. Isn't it? I'm trying to make your life easier, Andrew, in some respects, is go back to the directors now and say, which are the highest ones here you need done, which are the medium, which are the lowest? So, because otherwise you get a list of high and you'll be, you won't be focusing on those which are priority. Now, I don't know whether that's a decision you make or is it a decision you make with the directorate and the senior leadership team?
Generally, that's my decision, Chair, in terms of how we prioritise, but we do have discussions with various managers throughout the year in terms of trying to avoid busy periods, trying to avoid budget closing, trying to avoid school holidays, as I mentioned, for some examples. So the senior management, the SLT, are aware of the plan. They are aware of our intentions. We do negotiate the timescale of when we do the work throughout the year. As I said, it's not an exact science, so there is an element of negotiation involved in that. But it's something we will certainly consider moving forward. But we've got a team of auditors who are competent, professional, and will undertake the work to the best of their ability. So they're not sitting on their hands doing nothing. They're certainly working throughout the year, trying to get as much of the audit plan achieved as possible. In an ideal world, we would do 100%, but sometimes things are outside of our control, which means we do have to put back certain audits later than we would ideally like to undertake them.
Yeah, Andrew, we're not questioning the ability or competency of any of your team, okay? Let's make that very clear. You do the professional job. We see that in your report. So there's not a question there. I think there's a question for the directors as to what they see as the highest priorities. Picking up Councillor Judd, I just look on office equipment inventory. Now, to me, I don't know whether there's an issue with people pinching cupboards or seats or whatever. But to me, in the overall terms of things, given the financial climate, most probably is very low. And I think there needs to be a mature discussion at some level with you and the directors, not for you to be put in this position all the time, the directors to say, Tom, you've got 10 in here, you prioritise them now, high, medium and low, so that you actually know. And hopefully that would work out. So there's no criticism of you and your staff here, Andrew. Please don't take it that way. Matthew, first.
Thank you, Chair. I will just ask one question, and I think it follows on from the discussion just had. I guess last year, if I'm remembering right, the year-end target for plan completion was 80%. So I just wanted to check if that's the case for this year as well. And then on that theme, if you've earmarked any specific reviews in the plan now, that you'd be happy to be in that 20% you're not going to get to still give yourself a good basis this time next year for your opinion on internal control.
Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, the targets will be the same for 24-25, 80%. We're trying to be as realistic as we possibly can because, as I say, we know things happen. We know things change during the year. At this point, I can't say hand on heart that we've identified any jobs which would fall into that 20%. We would endeavour to do as much of the work as we possibly can. We've started the ball rolling in earnest. We'll be reporting back our Q1 figures into committee in due course. But at this point, it's too early to identify that whether or not we will achieve the 80% and what can we leave out in the 20%.
Any other questions? Good, John, did you have a question?
I just wanted to make the point, really, that this is not on the basis of what needs doing. I think it all needs doing, and preferably we could do as much as we possibly can on audit to make sure that we're as effective as possible. What I'm talking about is to look at what do I think are the most important things to audit. I'm going based off my assumptions, based on what you're telling us. I'm not an expert on every department within the council, and some kind of additional information as to what was seen as by the audit team and by directors as the most important things for us to audit, and to use that to see what you have ended up auditing at the end of the year. That's for me what I'm using the priority column for. And so not to have pretty much any distinction between most of the items doesn't help me at all with that. And so I'm going based on my preconceptions of what's important. Maybe the inventory stuff is extremely important because we're losing a lot of inventory. Maybe the budget setting saving audit isn't as important as I would have thought because there's lots of other scrutiny. So that kind of thing is very important for me to know what is in reality the most important things for us to audit and have we achieved that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. we'll certainly reflect on your comments and take that on board and see what we can do in terms of making that clearer to you as we report in the 24-25 back into committee.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just final comments, because I think absolutely we're not questioning the ability of the audit team. So I did just want to agree with the Chair in that. That is not what we're doing, and completely agree with Councillor Goodjohn as well. Last year we said, reading from the minutes, there was a need for clarity of the linkages between the audits planned and the Council's risks, and also the process around how audits were prioritised, same issue last year, and a request for timings and completion dates to be added, even if they're simply represented a quarter. And we did discuss about a column being added, and I think that's what we're asking for. It's not about questioning what's there, but it's just a tool for us to use to actually think about transparency. What is it this year that has to be delivered? What can be dropped off the end if need be? And that's all we just want that transparency of, is just making sure that's visible to us, so that if something slips later on, we can go, actually that slipped and it doesn't matter. That can go, we know why that is. Or hang on a minute, that was one we said was a priority at the beginning of the year. We might need to question the director or bring in somebody from the management team to say, why is that one slipping? Or that might be the audit team giving us that reassurance themselves. But I think that's transparency we're looking for. Absolutely not questioning the audit team.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. There's a balance, isn't it, really, in terms of the governance and audit committee's responsibilities and the operational side of the internal audit team, which I'm responsible for. And I accept, that you're not questioning or challenging the competency of my time, which is reassuring. So thanks for that. We'll look into that. In terms of the timing of the audit, it's something we do at an operational level on a quarterly basis. We haven't got enough resources to deliver what we would like to deliver to start with. So this is an additional thing we need to look into. But we'll do our best to have a look at these comments and report back. And if we can't do it, then I'll tell you we can't do it, Chair.
Well, thank you for that, Andrew. Obviously, we don't want to get involved in the weeds here, into the operational stuff. That's a matter for you and the management team of this authority to decide what you do and when you do it. And picking up Councillor Goodjohn's, we're not saying this needs to be, we're not experts in the field here across the authority services. So, but that's a job that, with all due respect, the SLT can do. That's what they're paid to do in some respects, guided by Cabinet and Council. But, they can say, we'll look at the list here and we'll give you a priority listing, and then hopefully you can take that on board and allocate your resources accordingly. Okay, any other questions? Any comments? No? Well, we've got the recommendations. I think the recommendations are that we note and approve the draft internal audit strategy and annual risk-based audit plan for 24-25. And I think it's subject to the limited assurance paragraph being put in, Andrew, if that's okay. And if possible, that the SLT, working with yourself, prioritise the high priorities into high, medium and low. Are you happy with that? Because it's not for you to decide, it's for the directors to decide in some respects.
Chair, I think
do you want to go away and have a chat with them about it?
We'll certainly have a chat to them, but we're getting into the depths of operational auditing.
Okay. But if you can have a chat and look at it. Okay. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? Nope. Thank you. And then item 10 is the updated forward work programme. Joan.
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item 10 is the forward work programme for 24-25. It enables the committee to ensure it's covering a range of responsibilities as per the terms of reference. So Appendix A is what you're familiar with. It's been produced to identify the reports that will be presented to this committee over the coming year. The next meeting is on the 18th of July, and the proposed agenda items are in the table within the covering report. So If members would like to endorse the schedule or confirm the list of people they'd like to attend, or indicate whether any additional information is required. Thank you.
Any questions, anyone?
I get very bored of myself asking this. I wish that there was a line on this report that said that the Cardiff City deal was going to come to this, because it's never there. We always get told it will be there, but it'd be nice to have a line.
With we're working with the head of finance. He sees the forward work programme, so he can indicate whether he feels that's appropriate or not. I think if there's something specific that you want them to come in for, then that would help in terms of including them on the forward work programme.
Yeah, they've been asked time and time again in regards to the accounts primarily, Andrew. As you know, Councillor Hooper's raised it a significant amount of time. Again, no excuse of this authority. Again, we're told that the City deal accounts haven't been signed off, and I think that was indicated by Audit Wales again tonight, that they haven't been signed off. But I think the point is, as soon as they've been signed off, we would like them to attend the very next committee. So if that could be picked out, I don't know whether that would satisfy Councillor Hooper. It needs to be scheduled in.
Can I just add, Chair? I think when the part of the concern I had is there was a point made that there was some complexities associated with the Cardiff City region deal. That was largely in relation to, I got the impression, the investments of the City deal. Now, this is a under scrutinised area across all the councils, I'd say, that are part of the City deal. And this council shouldn't necessarily just play along with that. So I'm really keen for them to do it. I think it's a broad request. I think narrowiness in this point, when we see the accounts, that may indicate a direction of travel and direction of questioning. But I want to push back, Andrew, if I may, to say for us to specify what we want to ask them here is inappropriate at this point in time. We're doing this on behalf of the residents of the Vale, who frankly did see very little benefit, I would argue, from the City deal, and rightly are questioning that.
You want to speak to Matt about it? Again, Councillor Hooper makes a point. The point, I think, well, we haven't got a lawyer here, but the point in reality is they are a corporate joint committee. Therefore, they are carrying out functions on behalf of this council. So therefore, they need to be challenged in accordance with the council's joint committee requirements. But if you can have a chat with Matt as to, hopefully we'll get an indication from Audit Wales as to when they're going to be signed off, if Sarah Jane comes back to us, and then obviously they can be plugged in to the next meeting. I should imagine that the Chief Exec, Kelly Byrne, maybe the 151 officer can attend and give us some background on it.
We'll certainly make Matt aware of that, the section 151, yeah.
No, thank you, Andrew. I think the other, obviously, item to be added in is that we want to report on all the responses from the directors and head service on the matters which have been outstanding on that limited list of audit reports. So subject to that, recommendation one is we note the forward work programme, and secondly, we endorse the schedule of items for the next meeting of 18th of July 24 to add in the director and head of service reports. I assume you made yes to a short covering report, is it, Andrew? Yeah. And then obviously that the Cardiff City deal will be scheduled as soon as the accounts are signed off. Someone prepared to move, please. Thank you, Councillor John. Seconded, Nigel. Thank you. Anyone against? No. Thank you very much. Item 11 then on the agenda. Any other item? There aren't any. Part 2 reports. Item 12. There are no items to go either in confidential or exempt. Can I thank everyone for their attendance this evening, for the debate and dialogue that's taken place, and now close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.